What's going on?
Welcome to the September edition of the Baltimore SharePoint Users Group. It's a great day to be here. And let me share my screen and we'll get right into it.
I don't hear you.
Okay, so going into slides briefly before we bring on our featured speaker. So first of all, thank you to our streaming partners. Welcome to BSPUG for those of you on Periscope. This is one of our first meetings where we stream the Periscope. And so I'm going to go into a brief introduction of who we are and what we do. And so with Baltimore SharePoint, the adventure started back in 2007. And so there was a challenge of MOS 2007 at the time, or Office SharePoint Server, which was at the time one of the a platform that I was working at a company at the time that chose to be an early adopter of MOS 2007, and MOS went on to break records in terms of being Microsoft's, in terms of server licenses, selling the most of any platform in its past. And with that, there was a lot of innovation. There was a lot of staffing companies. There were a lot of people who were general Microsoft specialists and went on to basically hang their hat on SharePoint. So I actually got into SharePoint. I was on the bench waiting for a project to kick off. So while in the office, I was asked to build a Windows SharePoint or a SharePoint server. And at the time, I didn't know what SharePoint was. And the rest, as they say, through my research is history. Bradley Beebe. Yes, sir. Thank you for that introduction to SharePoint through that task for many years. Brad Beebe got a card in the mail every year as a thank you for that lucrative, turn of events. So with Baltimore SharePoint, going back to the story, we needed to build a community around the demand that we had, meaning there was not a whole lot in terms of blogs or TechNet articles at the time to help us internally solve the problems that we're facing. It wasn't just stand up SharePoint. And if you remember, let's say going from WSS2 to WSS3, customization became a bigger requirement and request. And so feature stapling and customizing my sites, these were the tasks of that time within this firm. And so the co-founder, Eric Harlan, and I decided we wanted to get some answers and build a community around what we're doing. And so that's where Baltimore SharePoint started. That's the story. And so since then, we've gone on to be longest running community focused institution in the great state of Maryland. And when we quantify what we've done over time, training, helping people get certified, and employment as well, the story becomes very interesting. And one of the details I'm most proud of, this should actually be 5 or maybe 6 at this point, where people who started out within the user group have gone on to hire others, and some have gone on to be Microsoft Gold partners. And so there's an interesting story that's continuing to unravel within Baltimore SPUG. And so, as always, special thanks to the good folks at ProObject. In a previous world, pre-pandemic, ProObject was our meeting location every third Thursday of the month, free parking, great people and staff. And so they continue to support us. And thank you to Ted and Team ProObject. If you are seeking employment, send your resume to tmstaley@proobject.com. Last month, they shared some openings that they had, but I want you to make your own introduction and reach out to Ted and see what openings are available. They're always hiring. Many of the positions have a SharePoint, let's say, skill set, but it may be hybrid as far as engineer and or development work. Some of it is front-end development, so you definitely want to reach out to Ted. Moving along. Now, in terms of community, I am saddened to announce the shutdown of the long-running SPS events. For those of you who are not familiar, SharePoint Saturday is an event series that started in Virginia Beach. It was kind of a spinoff of SQL Saturday and has gone to become an international speaking circuit for community-focused admins, developers, architects, project managers, so on and so forth. Many companies have emerged as a result of it, and many professionals have gone on to be bona fide rock stars, Microsoft employees, and community leaders, authors, publishers through the camaraderie of this event series. Now, that leads to the question, well, where does that leave our long-running event series, which is SharePoint Saturday Baltimore? Definitely a version of the SPS event series. Will continue to host our events, especially as the world continues to open up. We'll just brand it under a different name. We have a good thing going here, so there's no need to mess with the recipe. So thank you to the team who have put together SPS events over the years, and we'll continue to move forward locally with Baltimore themed events, which features a one-day conference free of charge where the best and brightest regional speakers and a few national and international speakers come in the spirit of knowledge sharing and fellowship. And so stay tuned for details for the next SharePoint Saturday. Now, we have a golden rule here at BSPUG in terms of unemployment and job uncertainty. The golden rule is that if you're listening to my voice after 6 p.m. and you're a member of this user group, you are essentially, you have a quality, and that quality is that you go above and beyond. And people who go above and beyond shouldn't be without work. And so the user group in itself, any user group, whether it's SUG DC or Power Platform user group, these tends to be hubs of activity in terms of hiring. Baltimore SharePoint is no different. And so if you are out of work, you have a contract that is giving you some uncertain vibes and signals, please send your email to me directly, and we'll see what we can do with job placement and help and support. Now, the free resume, career, and LinkedIn review sessions, it says extended through September 30th, but I'm going to let you in on a trade secret. It's going to extend. So throughout this time period, there's a lot of people who are getting laid off and many things happening. And we want to make sure that our members continue to have access to opportunity. So just send your resume in. Again, hello@mrshadi.com, and let's get you back to work, or let's make sure that you have as many options as possible. So also, in terms of business advice and mentoring, SCORE is the nation's largest network of business mentors. There's many of you who are very talented. You want to start your own businesses, and you are looking to do so, but you don't know how that may work from a business standpoint. We are we have a partnership through SCORE for you to get free business mentoring. So take a step back. GreaterBaltimore.score.org is the website. So now, call for speakers each month. Unless you want to listen to my voice, we have a stage available for call for speakers. That's different topics such as break fix, lesson learned, and feature presentation. Not every presentation needs to be an hour. So break fix can be what I learned or what I was able to troubleshoot at work. And that's always open to you as a speaker. Okay, so before we transition into the featured speakers, let me make sure everyone is the session itself will be on demand as well. And also, our speaker of the evening, our featured speaker, is in the leadership role at Blackspoke. And these roles at Blackspoke are TSSCI and preferably TSSCI with polygraph. So if you are holding that clearance level, these are great opportunities for you. I want you to go to blackspoke.com/careers, blackspoke.com/careers, and take a look at the opportunities with Blackspoke. It will also be posted in the comments on the social media platforms that you are viewing. So keep this in mind. So, and without further ado, I'm going to bring to the stage our featured speaker. And we're going to talk about the basics of ZeroTrust and integration with SharePoint on-prem. He's going to break it down in detail with a white paper that he has to share and answer any questions that you have. I bring to you Joaquin Torres.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate the intro. Thanks for the the plug for Blackspoke. I appreciate that a lot.
Yes, sir. Stage is yours.
All right. So tonight's event, this is my first event speaking on any of these SharePoint user groups. I know Scott and I, Scott Brewster and I have a relationship that dates back many, many years, probably 12 years or more, maybe. We worked closely in the Army Intel space, and we just did a lot of great work. And I was Microsoft at the time, and he's just an awesome person, and he finally got me looped in, and I appreciate him inviting me to this, and I thought it'd be an interesting topic to talk about, because it's something that I work a lot in the Intel industry, in Intel community, and even though Intel community is somewhat behind on the curve of technology, especially when it comes to Office 365 and Azure and GCC High and Office 365, DoD, IL5, Impact Level 5, all those environments. They've bought into a lot of Amazon stuff, but now they're starting to look into the Azure / O365, M365 platform. So this topic of of zero trust has become a very hot topic within my community. And if you look up zero trust, there's a NIST paper on it, 800-207. So it's good reading. I would definitely recommend, if you're interested in zero trust or what that methodology means, look that up and read that. And everyone has a little bit of a slight twist to what zero trust really means. Microsoft has their own version of zero trust, and there's principles that pretty much apply across the board. But it's a lot to ingest in one night, in one event. Even as a technology professional, if you're working for a company and they say, hey, we want to implement zero trust, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take many, many months, maybe even years to get it fully implemented. The good thing is, the way I approach it and the way I try to help others ingest what zero trust is, think of it as peeling an onion, right? You peel one layer, you add a little bit of security, you layer some more security, you get more requirements, you layer a little bit more. And then by the time you're done, you have a very thought out plan and implementation plan and something that's engineered to really meet all the requirements that, your business or your company's looking to meet. So with that being said, so one of the agencies I work for, they're interested in implementing this. And there's a lot of things with zero trust from Microsoft's perspective that touches every application that you can think of inside Office 365, whether it be Windows Virtual Desktop or Azure Virtual Desktop, or the new Windows 365 or Azure Active Directory, or any of the Office applications that are available to you as being a subscriber to Office 365, like SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, Planner. So the foundation of zero trust from an Azure / M365 perspective is really Azure Active Directory, the sole identity source for applications within inside Office. And if you peel back that layer, you get into conditional access, and really conditional access is really powerful feature inside Office 365, and really it's an Azure feature, but Office 365 leverages it in the fact that you can create rules and layer rules to help protect your assets inside Office 365, and also help protect assets that are not inside Office 365. And I'll talk a little bit about that too, because as part of part two, to segue to part two of this event tonight, is I'm going to talk about zero trust, and then I'm going to talk about, since this is a SharePoint group, I'm going to talk about something kind of interesting that I just learned recently. So some people still have SharePoint on-prem for whatever reason. Some people just can't go to SharePoint Online yet, or they haven't decided to go there for security reasons. My agency is one of them. They have a lot of on-prem SharePoint. But as Azure Active Directory becomes more popular and people are starting to migrate their identities to the cloud, or do like a hybrid ADFS on-prem / Azure Active Directory in the cloud, they want to leverage Azure Active Directory to protect their on-prem SharePoint. So I found this really cool article. I don't even remember how I ran into it, but I was looking up something on conditional access in SharePoint, and somebody out there, thank God for the open source world, somebody out there created an Azure claims provider that you can install on 2013, 2016, 2019 versions of SharePoint. And what it does is allows you to permission your on-prem SharePoint stuff with Azure users or groups, which is really neat. I didn't know that existed. I know you can probably custom create one, but this has already been done. And what that allows you to do is, as you start talking about zero trust, how do you protect your on-prem web-based applications like SharePoint? Well, with this, you can actually do that, because if my identity if SharePoint is trusting the identity from Azure, and it's the only identity that it trusts, now I can layer on the conditional access policies in Azure to protect my on-prem applications like SharePoint. And you could do things, really neat things like, if a person has a device that's not enlisted in Intune, maybe I just give them read access to SharePoint and all the documents within inside SharePoint and Excel sheets and PowerPoint sheets, presentations, and not let them copy or paste or take screenshots or download those documents to devices that are not protected by Intune. So it becomes really neat when you start peeling back that onion. So I don't really have a presentation today per se, but I do have a white paper that everyone that asks me about, what does zero trust really mean? Microsoft has written a really nice white paper, and it kind of gives you the 3 foundational pillars. Actually, there's 6 pillars, but it has like 3 foundational aspects of what zero trust means to them. So I'm going to share that in just a second. Let me see if I can share my screen here. Share my screen. Okay. Let me know if you guys can see that.
I see it. Yes.
All right. So, and I'll paste this link in the chat window, so that way you guys can paste it from there. But essentially, this is the white paper. It's fairly high level. It's only 7 pages, but if you're new to zero trust, I highly recommend you read this. So there's some guiding principles, right? Verify explicitly, use least privilege access, and assume breach. And what they mean by all these things is, the assumed breach is really, really an interesting thing, because what they expect is that any device, whether it be inside your perimeter or outside of your perimeter, you're constantly validating that it's patched. You're constantly validating that it's coming from where you say it's supposed to come from. So that piece is the Intune function. So the 3 major pieces, at least when you're peeling back the onion, and again, there's a lot of them, but the 3 major pieces that I focus on when I'm starting with the zero trust is, and I like to take step-by-step baby steps, right, is Azure Active Directory, the identity, conditional access, and Intune, right? So if you combine those 3 things, you get pretty close to accomplishing a zero trust environment. Now there's more. There's cloud app security. There's Defender for identity. There's Defender for the endpoints. Those are all part of zero trust as well. But if you try to implement all those across the board in one shot, you're going to get overwhelmed really quickly. So the first thing I recommend people do when they're talking about zero trust is your identity in the cloud? So hopefully it is. That's the first layer. And then I jump to Intune, because what's happening now, especially with COVID and what happened last year, and the face of the industry has changed, and it's going to stay like this for a very long time, if not permanently. So instead of having on-prem workstations at an office, you're having mobile devices or your own laptops. Bring your own device, basically. So all of those things tie into Intune. So you can create Intune policies that state, I'm going to allow Android version XYZ in, and not an older version, right? Because maybe there's some holes that haven't been plugged. Or I'm going to allow iPads in, or Mac OSs of certain levels. Or I'm going to allow Windows devices that are patched to XYZ patches. They have to have September's patches, or whatever the case is. So you can layer on all those really neat, intricate policies into Intune, and you can apply them to your users, so that when they go to the portal Office 365, or they try to launch Outlook, or they try to launch Office and connect to some SharePoint document, or whatever the case is, Intune is basically going to say, the conditional access is going to say, you have to be compliant. Let me redirect you to the Intune portal so you can become compliant. And the Intune portal is going to essentially tell you, you're not compliant because you don't have the right version of Office. Let's go remediate that right now. Or you can't access this resource because you're coming from an IP that we don't allow, right? Maybe you're not inside the United States, and your business should only focus its users inside the United States. Maybe, some businesses do have overseas office, so you can add those IP addresses, for example, in Europe, to allow access to those systems. But if you have a company that's solely working in the United States, you're not going to, if you get an IP address that's coming from Europe or whatever other country outside of the US, you're going to want to deny that, right? So conditional access and Intune allow you to do those things. So scrolling down a little bit, the 6 pillars is identities, devices, applications, data, infrastructure, and networks. And what these really do is, so we spoke a little bit about identities. We spoke about devices, and that's really the bring your own device, Intune, stuff like that. Applications, we can limit, you can have some policies, for example, that limit who can do what with documents inside SharePoint. For example, I gave you the example of, maybe if I'm using my corporate device to access SharePoint, I'm able to download and read documents and edit documents and whatnot. But if I'm using some other device that's not corporate owned or managed by Intune, I'm just going to give the user read-only access, right? So those are the kind of policies that you can do with conditional access. And then there's data. Ultimately, you're either ingesting data, creating data, reading data, sharing data. Another aspect of ZeroTrust is labeling, data loss prevention, IRM, information rights management. Those things are really important too. So, some of these things require a higher level of licensing, like E5 will give you the automated data tagging. So if you're, you can create a policy inside DLP that says, if I see the word crayon, I'm going to classify this document as FOUO, for example, or, classified, whatever the case may be. Those things can be automatically classified. So now when you auto classify a document, you may also apply encryption to that document, right? So let's talk about the Edward Snowden thing. What happened with Edward Snowden was a SharePoint administrator. He downloaded a bunch of documents. Those documents didn't have IRM. I'm simplifying this, but those documents didn't have IRM or any kind of information rights protection on it. Put it on a thumb drive and he walked away with it, right? So now granted, could you maybe open those documents if they were encrypted? It would take you a lot of resources to do that and to crack that, right? So, layering on the security really just protects your business and your corporation or your agency that you're supporting to really do that. So if someone accidentally steals a document or accidentally takes a document, shares it with someone that shouldn't have access to it, or nefariously shares a document that the person shouldn't have access, if you have IRM protected documents and you have conditional access and all of those layers of security in place, that user is not going to be able to open that document or print it or read it or anything like that. So data is a big thing, but that's another layer. Like setting up DLP policies is not an easy thing. It's easy from a tech perspective, but it's not so much from a policy perspective, right? Because you really have to think thoroughly. Like, I've had companies and other businesses DLP their way out of documents, right? You can encrypt a document and never get back to it because it just wasn't set up correctly. So kind of dangerous, but it's also very important. From an infrastructure perspective, again, we're talking VMs, VDI, Windows servers. Azure has a thing, and this is part of the ZeroTrust. Azure has a thing called Azure Information Protection, AIP, where you can deploy a client on-prem to an on-prem server, or even a server in the cloud for that matter, to scan all your on-prem data. And based off the unified labeling that you have enabled, it can, based on rules that you have in unified labeling, it can then tag and label those documents and also encrypt. There's a discovery portion of it that you can just run in discovery mode, but then you can take action on it. So you can find, how many agencies you work for or companies you work that have terabytes and terabytes of data on file servers that are not classified. They don't know what they have inside of them. They're just sitting there, troves of data. Well, with AIP, as part of this, you can deploy those agents to a server and you can scan, and you can build clusters inside Azure that kind of process the data and make it faster. But you can scan hundreds and hundreds of terabytes of data and then apply rules to that data. Now you've protected that data. And if that data accidentally gets lost or stolen or whatever the case is, you at least know that in order for someone to open that data or get to it or read it or print it, they're going to have to authenticate back into Azure and have those rights. So if everyone's heard of defense in depth. To me, the zero trust model is very similar to defense and death. You're just constantly applying layers and layers of security to further protect your system. But you can start at the very outer portion of the onion, right? That's identity. Are we inside Azure AD? Conditional access, and some basic Intune policies. And then you at least protect yourself from that, and then you can slowly but surely get through all the other layers. This is a diagram. I kind of like this diagram. It kind of talks about everything in one visual picture. I'm a very visual person. So again, I'll share this this guide in the forum. They mentioned the maturity model. So again, to me, when I'm looking at this, I'm talking about starting slow, starting small, and then moving to an optimal phase, right? And again, any business that wants to do this overnight, they're not thinking it through correctly. So this takes time to implement, and it takes a lot of thought. And the technical pieces aren't the difficult ones. Again, it's the more policy business cases that you have to build to thoroughly implement this. So I'm going to pause a little bit and see if anyone has any questions. I'm not sure how you guys usually run the forum. This is my first time on it, so I'll pause for a little bit, take a breath, and see if anyone has any questions.
Yes. Quick question. What would you say for an organization getting started? What would you say are some prerequisites, especially for on-prem SharePoint, do they need to have in place?
Yeah. So from an on-prem SharePoint perspective, and I just posted that link inside the forum, so everyone should have it. From an on-prem SharePoint perspective, all of this ZeroTrust technology and the methodologies require Intune / conditional access / an Azure identity. So that is a requirement. Anyone that's trying to implement ZeroTrust and kind of layer those protective adhesive components into their on-prem application, doesn't have to be SharePoint, it could be any web-based app. The foundation of it is Azure Active Directory. You have to have an identity in the cloud because there's nothing on-prem that you can do to do conditional access. Unless you could probably purchase a third-party product that does like a PEP, policy enforcement stuff. But if we're talking Office 365, an identity in the cloud has to be there. You have to have P2, which is a premium 2 level of Active Directory. So there's P1, there's basic, there's P1, there's P2. Microsoft makes it really interesting in how they license things. You can get really confused really quickly. I get confused all the time. They have big bundles, E3, E5. If you get E5, you get everything. If you don't want to pay for E5, you get E3, and then you tack on P2 Active Directory, which gives you fine-grained conditional access policies and Intune. But back to your question, I think I'm answering it. If you want to protect something on-prem like SharePoint or whatever, and you want to do this conditional access and start applying the ZeroTrust methodologies, Azure Active Directory is a core thing that you need. Conditional access is a core thing you need, and then Intune is a core thing that you need.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Please unmute yourself and ask away. Scott, your microphone should be live.
Yeah. Just so everyone knows, because I've helped out a couple of organizations with this. The P2 licensing for Azure AD, or P1 if you'd like, a little more expensive, is required in order to meet the NIST requirements, and all federal contracting companies that wish to get more work must comply with, I believe it's 800-171. And that's where some of these things are completely laid out. I know that 207 talks specifically about ZeroTrust, but it's those ZeroTrust policies that are inside of 171 as well, that people need to focus on in order to get that work, because if they don't comply, they can't compete for work.
Yeah, and Scott, let me chime in here a little bit too. You bring up a great point. what you're referencing is this thing called, so a lot of the federal contracts that are coming out now, it used to be where you would self-attest that you met some kind of cyber maturity, or that you had good hygiene, basically. And you just basically said, yeah, government, I have good hygiene, and you upload a spreadsheet, and it's all phony and baloney. Government just, they accepted that. And they're like, okay, they say they're good, we'll believe it. Now what they have, this thing is called CMMC, which is Cyber Maturity Model Certification. And they have different levels, level 1 through 5. Level 3 is what the defense industry base is being asked to meet. And it's basically a mixture of 800-53 and 800-171 with about 13 extra controls for level 3. And what they are asking you to do is to meet those controls and prove that you have those controls by going through an audit, which before you never had to go through an audit. So people would just say, yeah, I'm compliant, and move on. So now there's a thing where, auditors are going to be able to, and you get to hire your auditor, right? There's like a CMMC board, there's a CMMC, the AB, and then there's like, you can become an RPO, a registered practitioner organization. And then you can become an RP, which is a registered practitioner, which is a person like a consultant that would go in to help a company get to a point where they can get audited and pass the accreditation model. Yeah. But what Microsoft has done is just interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. Is Microsoft has created a placemat, and I've pasted that into the chat as well. And basically, it's a big spreadsheet that let's see if it pulls up for me. That basically you kind of go through and see which portions of Office 365 would help you get to level 3, and which portions are already done by Microsoft, and which portions require policy. I mean, these are all the controls, and it's really neat. I haven't even read the full instruction sheet on how to use this, but essentially, you basically click on a control, and it dynamically changes, what's in scope, what's out of scope, and how it maps, and what the descriptions are. So if anyone is in the defense industry base and they're looking to get CMMC certified and go through the level 3 certification, I highly recommend you look at this placemat. And there's a million of them out there, but Microsoft provided this one. One other thing too, we could talk days for this about this. If you're in Office 365 already, there's a inside the Security and Compliance Center. You can run. It's now a premium template. If you have E5, you have it. It used to be if you had E3, you had it, and they gave you a little warning like, this is a premium template. You may not have this later. But basically, you can run CMMC level 3 a test on your environment, and it'll tell you everything that's compliant and everything that's not compliant. And then you can manually assign people the ability to go fix something, to go remediate something. So it's actually really neat that Microsoft provides that inside their security compliance portal. They also offer for 800-171, 853, tons of compliance templates that you can apply. Yeah. They also do it inside Azure. Azure has a thing called blueprints. So if you're going to be going down the path of, if you're heavy into Azure and you're going to be going down the path of ZeroTrust, there's a ZeroTrust blueprint that you can apply to your Azure environment, and it basically holds your hand through the entirety of getting to a ZeroTrust environment. So again, those are huge things. If for those that are in cyber, this is going to be lots of work that has to be done over the next couple of years. So I'll give the mic back to somebody if they have questions as well.
Just curious, for your own company, did you do it in-house, or did you outsource to someone who had been doing this for a while?
You're talking about the CMMC stuff?
Yeah.
We did it in-house because, we have a lot of people that know this stuff. But there are companies that just don't have the time or the ability to do it, and you can outsource it. I will say we did price it out because we were interested in see what it would cost. and on average, it's costing around $60,000 to $80,000 to get a consultant to come through and help you, get to the point where you're ready for an audit. So
Yeah.
it is pricey. Some companies, that's a drop in the bucket, and that's a big chunk. But I will say it's not difficult. Most of companies. So, for example, our company, Blackspoke, we had an IT policy, we had a ConOps, we have an SSP, because we have a couple prime contracts that require us to have those things. So we already had a lot of the foundation built for this, and all we did was just kind of augment those things and added I think it's like 23 extra controls. And really, a lot of the things from a control perspective in CMMC are not so technical as they are more policy. For example, documenting your ingress and egress traffic, right? Well, that's kind of easy for us because we don't really have a data center that we store stuff. We're in a cloud, so we already have an answer for that. But for companies that are larger, like the GDs or the Northrop Grummans of the world, they have on-prem systems and they have a lot of ingress and outgress. So they have bigger workloads. Like you work for Leidos, right? So they have a huge presence on-prem that they have to, get accredited for. So it becomes a heavier lift as obviously as large as a company like that is. But for us, we did it ourselves. Now we haven't gone through the certification process. There's still the CMMC AB. I know we kind of digressed into this conversation, but it's really related to this. The CMMC AB, they haven't finalized how they're going to do this. It's sort of written in faint chalk that it's going to be required, but they haven't finalized and said this is what it's going to be. So eventually, when they get to that point, you're going to have to go to this, CMMC AB website and interview an auditor, or an RPO, and say, hey, we want you guys to come audit us, and you're going to pay them a certain amount of money. Nobody knows what that is yet, and they're going to come audit your systems, right? And then they're either going to pass you or fuck you. And then if you pass, then great, you can go after these contracts that require CMMC level 3, right? If you fail, then you're not going to be able to go after these contracts. And some of these contracts, $100 million contracts. So,
sorry, is there a grace period on any of that?
It's unknown. Nobody really knows. My guess is, so here's what the rumor is. So there's a contract. I forgot what it's called now. It's in the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember. For the people that are on, STARS 2, for example. STARS 2 doesn't require. STARS 3 does. The people that are already incumbent on STARS 2, I think they're going to get a grace period, right? A year, 2 years, whatever. New people that are going after STARS 3, you're going to have it from the get-go, right? So that's, I think, what's happening in the contracting world.
Got it. Yeah. I did some of this in-house for my previous company. And yeah, the bulk of it was making certain you had all the documentation. I can only imagine how much worse it would be for a large company to get this done. We are fortunate that we were all in the cloud. I don't know what my current company is doing. I'm not involved in the corporate side of the house, but I just wish my client understood ZeroTrust.
Yeah. It's I'm where I work at, Scott.
Yep.
Three-letter agency. They're just now getting into this ideology of ZeroTrust, and it's even different in where I work at, because what I'm sure, I don't know if you guys can see this on the screen, the assessment stuff. But this is where you can create a CMMC level 3 assessment and then review, like, what are the pending actions that you have to do, and what are the things that are inherited by Microsoft, et cetera, et cetera. So this is all part of like an E5 license. If you don't have E5, you can buy the assessment. But anyways, in my agency, so I don't know if everyone's familiar with, there's commercial Office 365, there's government commercial cloud, GCC, which is DFARS compliant, and like federal businesses use it, and I forgot the acronym, and then there's GCC High, right, which is That's an environment that's close to the DoD environment that allows CUI, controlled
Unclassified info.
information, right? And it's meant for defense industry-based contractors that work with government closely, and you want to handle you have an ITAR requirement in your contracts, or you have a DFARS requirement. And then there's the DoD IL5 environment, which is where DoD government's going into. And those environments, the feature set gets less and less as you go into so DoD IL5 doesn't have all the there's no feature parity. So implementing zero trust in there becomes a little more difficult because some of the feature sets aren't all there yet. So you have to kind of balance the thing between environments too.
Yeah, it's something I've noticed working with GCC. I hate that I end up not having a lot of features that I take for granted. Like the forms web part on SharePoint sites, not available in GCC. Like, what was so hard about that particular web part that we couldn't include it?
Yeah. This link may be useful for people on this call. I don't know if anyone's seen the roadmap, but they have a really nice website that lets you filter on, what's in development, what's rolling out, and what's been launched. And if you work in a GCC high environment, you can see what's there and what's not, or DoD for that matter. I'll post this link as well in the window. I think it's fairly useful. Every time somebody asks me, is this feature available? Like, I don't know, just go to the roadmap. And
yeah, I was kind of surprised that UK MOD, Ministry of Defense, is on commercial.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. But that's the level of trust that they have because of how secure it already is.
So back to zero trust. I hope I didn't lose anyone. I may have lost some people, but your eyes are glazed over maybe. But essentially, my recommendation is you approach it layer by layer. Start off with Azure Active Directory. If you have that, great. Start looking at Intune. Intune looks really complicated, and it can become very complicated. But at the very basic level, you can create some very simple policies to allow or disallow certain things, like your own device. If you want to, if your company has iPad or Apple devices or Macs or whatever, you can add your serial numbers to your portal, and those are the only devices that can access your system, right? So it's really neat stuff. But at the very basic level, you can do some very simple things, and then configure conditional access on top of that, and then you've kind of started the first line of defense, right? I didn't even talk about multi-factor authentication, but that's an easy thing to implement now inside Azure Active Directory, right? It's multi-factor, and phone, you can do text, email, or you can do the Authenticator app, which what Microsoft is recommending now is the Authenticator app, because, and I have never seen this happen, but I guess people are getting their SIM cards copied through social engineering, calling Verizon saying, hey, I lost my whatever I have on the phone. But anyways, start off at the very basics, right? Those things, and then start to peel that onion further back, and then you'll slowly get into the zero trust ideology. So does anyone have any other questions?
Any questions, please unmute. Also, make sure that you save the chat. So if you go to chat and you look at to hosts and panelists, there's 3 dots, and you select save chat. And when the session ends, it will write a notepad file with all the links that have been shared in the comments. So any other questions? Unmute yourself, please. Okay, the group does not have any questions.
Are you still there?
Oh yeah, there we go, Nancy.
Does he have a LinkedIn account? There are a bazillion of his name on LinkedIn.
I do. Let me, I'll paste that into the chat. Stand by. One other thing I wanted to I'll paste as well. Let me share in the right window. Do you guys see a web page that says Daniel Cronlund Cloud Tech blog?
Yep, that's what we see.
Yes,
we see it.
So this person has started off a really good template for conditional access. It's not really talking about the ZeroTrust, but this is essentially a cornerstone of ZeroTrust. I'm going to paste this in the chat window. And what he actually has, it's kind of interesting because you know about DevOps and things like that. He actually has a tool. I mean, he publishes a bunch of stuff that allows you to track through Git or whatever the conditional acts. I mean, once you start applying these policies, you can get so far into these policies that you may forget what settings you have. He has a methodology of how to record those settings, and he publishes in the Git. So it's kind of cool. So I'm going to go ahead and paste this, and he provides a good description of what this means. Like this one requires A2. It's called high risk sign-ins. A lot force MFA for users. This is really good foundational conditional access policy that you guys can start off with if you're venturing in this area. Let me paste that as well in the chat window.
Do you have any unclass contracts that you guys do?
So we don't. Well, so we do. We have one prime contract at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA. It's a data engineering contract. We're basically a data warehouse. It started off where all our work was on the high side, and now due to COVID, we've kind of moved all our development to the low to move to high. That agency is very forward-leaning on low to high stuff. So we have been dabbling in hiring people without clearances that we can, because we're primed there, that we can actually go through the clearance process. So we do have that, but the majority, all the rest of our contracts are all, cleared, minimum TSSCI with some kind of poly.
Awesome. Yeah, I won't be doing any more classified work anytime soon. I don't want to deal with the bureaucracy anymore, but still working with public trust, it's a whole lot nicer.
Yeah. There is a lot of red tape and bureaucracy and blah 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 in the cleared space, but it's promising, that's for sure. But
if you have some of that unclass stuff, are you able to sponsor anyone or get your client to sponsor more specifically?
Yeah. So that contract that I mentioned is CAVE, Corporate Analytics Visualization Environment. It's very data engineering focused, so like ingest and SSIS and Kafka and stuff like that, and Tableau based. But yes, we can sponsor for good candidates. We can definitely sponsor, because our government customers kind of picky on who we put in there. So we can't use it as we can't use it as an incubator for just anyone. But sure.
Yeah. No, it's something whenever I've seen more so with smaller companies than with bigger companies, that they find some kind of way to bring people in as interns or something, process them for a clearance, have them doing some kind of side work on the side, and then once they're cleared, they put them into a full position, and everyone's all happy. It's pretty interesting. Have you taken on an intern before?
We haven't, because there's some very strict IRS rules about that, and we just haven't had, the time to figure out the IRS roadmap. Like the IRS, they make everything difficult.
Yeah, I understand.
So
that.
We haven't done that because of that. We did start looking into hiring our heroes. It's a pretty cool program. Some of you may know about it already. Where they, people that are getting out of the military that have clearances or whatever, and, the military pays us to pay them essentially, and they get to work for us for 6-7 months, something like that, and we get to hire them after if we choose to. But we just started that, and we haven't fully onboarded yet. There's an excruciating process to be compliant for that, so we got to do.
Yeah. Compliance with anything is always expensive.
Yeah.
whenever you've tried to work with these customers now doing zero trust, what's the biggest pushback? I mean, I imagine there's a lot of culture change. I know that with your client, or at least all the clients in the IC, they all assume that because they're air gapped, everything's secure. And so they never bothered with all of the other things that they should have done. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if in the classified spaces, it's even harder to implement zero trust than in the unclassified space.
So here's the biggest pushback that we have from every agency that I work at, and it's a valid one, is they don't want to put all their eggs in one basket. So Amazon doesn't have a zero trust thing that you can do right off the bat and enable it like Microsoft Azure does, and all of 365. They have Azure Identity, they have conditional access, they have Intune. If your client is heavy on Amazon, there's no, you kind of you have to bring your own stuff to Amazon to make that happen. And they don't like to hear that, right? They want to believe that they can go anywhere and do the same thing. But it's kind of hard because if your identity sits in Azure, I don't have an identity provider inside AWS. I mean, I do, but it's not Azure Active Directory or anything like that.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to convince the clients to put all their eggs in one basket. And we're not really telling them to put all their eggs in one basket, but they immediately think that if you have to put your identity and your conditional access policies and your Intune policies are inside Azure, now you've put all your eggs in one basket. So that's a hard thing to convince even the smartest of government people that you're not doing it. And then the other part of that is Azure and Office 365 don't exist in secret and on top secret networks yet. They're coming out. It's not there yet, but we're years away from that happening. So it's hard for the government to say, we're going to do this in the unclass and kind of not do it on the other networks. They kind of want to all do it at the same time. So it's been a real difficult push to get them to realize that it's okay to start unclass first and learn, and then you can implement it on secret and on JWICs. But it's hard to convince them. They lately, government really hates. I mean, I get this. The government really hates going all in on one technology. They like to mix and match, and that becomes.
Isn't the issue with AWS not having some of these features part of the reason why Microsoft initially won the JEDI contract?
If you can imagine what the DoD has on they're mostly, if not all, Windows based. They're Exchange based. They use SharePoint. They have SCCM. They have SCOM. They have Windows 10. They have Office. The majority of their stuff that they work on is Microsoft focused, right? It just really is. Now, it's not to say that their servers can't sit inside AWS. Obviously, with that CIA contract, C2S, that's out there. That's a high side instance of AWS. So your applications and your servers can sit in a different cloud instance. But the majority of what the DoD does and what they work on are Windows-based systems. They have Linux and other stuff, but they're mainly Windows-based systems. So yeah, it made sense. Like, to me, it made sense for the DoD to pick Microsoft as a winner, because they really need to get their hands wrapped around all that stuff. They have hundreds of thousands of endpoints. And Amazon doesn't really have a solution for that. You can bring your solution and put it in their cloud, sure, but you're not gaining anything, right? What you're trying to gain out of JEDI is you're not patching servers, you're not worried about SharePoint upgrades, you're not worried about Exchange upgrades, you're not worried about, all those things. The cloud's providing that for you. You're just using it as SaaS, right? Software as a service, platform as a service. So, but again, it's too big of a contract to give to one person, I guess.
Would have been nice.
Well, it looks like JEDI's gonna give it to both, I guess.
Yeah. They're now multi-vendor on everything. I saw all the news on it.
Yeah, I mean that's safe too. I'm of the mindset, like, keep your Microsoft Windows identity and all that stuff inside Azure and Office 365. Leverage SharePoint, leverage Exchange, leverage Teams. That's a great place to put it. And if you want to do your DevOps and your development environments and your spin-offs of servers until I put it inside Azure, or inside AWS. I don't know who's reading that. That maybe Scott. Sounds really loud.
Sorry.
But yeah, there's an argument to be made for that. And then the counter argument to that is now you're splitting your data from your applications, from your, your desktop, so, you want to keep your data as close as you can to your desktop. That's usually a good principle when you're designing something. So if I have my desktop inside Azure and I have my server inside Amazon, does that really do anything for you? Is it slower? Is it worse? I don't know. It's a lot of networking, a lot of big data pipes that you have to create to make the performance the same.
Yeah. Currently, we have worldwide operations for the IC and DoD. Locally, at any of these facilities that we have around the world, we have servers in place and whatnot, and then, systems to do the encryption so they can talk back to the States. Are we getting any kind of a data center outside of the continental United States that's going to be used for, GCC high or anything like that?
I'm in
to stay closer to the user?
Yeah, I'm in pretty close contact with Microsoft almost on a weekly basis, and there is no plan right now to provide GCC high or DoD environments in Oconus. And I don't even know if Amazon's doing that either. Part of ITAR is export control, right? You can't, you have to have data sovereignty inside the United States, right? It has to be data sovereign in the US. So I don't know how you meet that with putting a data center overseas, right? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but it sounds like that's counter to what ITAR requires. So maybe that's the holdup. But as far as talking to Microsoft, they don't have any plans on building data centers to make, our agencies have overseas installations, right? I mean, we know that presence out there in Europe and all those places. They have on-prem data centers. They have data centers that they're managed by those agencies. There's no cloud. They have things that you can. So for example, Azure has this thing called Azure Stack. I think they've changed the name. But they basically sell you, it's like a Dell thing or an HP thing. They sell you a stack of equipment that has the Azure bits on it, and you can pretend that you're in the cloud. You can pretend, you can use a similar interface like Azure Active Directory and storage and blob storage and stuff like that in those areas, but it's not the cloud. It's still hardware in your data center. And then Amazon has a similar thing called, what the hell is Amazon's called? What are they called? Yeah, Outposts. So, essentially they give you a huge box, and it has like EC2 functionality and S3 functionality. Not every functionality, like they don't have Lambda and stuff like that, but it's like, it's like EC2 and S3, which are like the main IaaS infrastructure as a service type stuff. If this thing gets published on YouTube, and my Amazon buddies are like, you said the wrong thing. But if they tell me I said the wrong thing, I'll invite them to the next SharePoint.
Yeah, I'm gonna call you out next time.
Yeah. So I mean, they have these things where I think it's like, yeah, it's AWS stuff at the edge. Oh, Snowball. Some of it, I don't know if they changed the word Snowball to this, but Snowball is like this huge multi-terabyte device that you can, leverage to do stuff, Amazon based, like deploy some EC2 instances and stuff like that on your edge. But it doesn't give you every single API or every single thing that like the real cloud gives you. So yeah, so yeah, they give you S3 compatibility, object storage with 40 vCPUs. And I think you can deploy some EC2. Oh, they have Lambda functions as well, so they've upgraded. But Yeah, I don't know, because of the ITAR stuff. I don't know if, data centers are allowed in those other countries. So,
Okay. Any other questions before we wrap things up? Okay, this is super informative. There's a lot of homework to do in the links provided. And thank you for delivering this topic.
you're welcome. I appreciate it.
All right. Once again, blackspoke.com/careers with an S. That's blackspoke.com/careers. And if you have TSSCI, preferably TSSCI with Polygraph, this is a great place for you to go and get some positions and have some conversations, DC, Virginia, Maryland, and take the next step. So, yes.
Can he put his LinkedIn email address or whatever? Because I went to click to add a connection and it asked for his email address.
I just pasted it in the chat.
It's in the chat.
Thanks.
No problem.
Okay. See you next month. We'll be talking backup of Microsoft 365. We'll have a vendor coming in to deliver that topic. So see you next month, third Thursday of October. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Ciao. Thanks, Joaquin.